You're welcome.
Okay, how are we doing?
Good.
Everybody got a little energy left? We shake off lunch here just a moment.
Yep.
How about we do a quick start of the session? This is just 10 minutes on transfers. But just to get us started, those of us who can stand, I'd like you to go ahead and stand. Those of you who are seated, I'd like you to put your hands in the air or move your arms for me. We're just going to turn around in a circle, as they say, stretch just a little bit, and then we can go ahead and be seated again. But those of you who are seated, give me a little circle in your arms there. Give me a little movement there. If you make a noise, that's a good sign. You're doing it right. All right, so we're back energized. What you just did was a transfer. For those of you seated, you did a weight transfer. Did you notice when you move your arms side to side, your body weight moves? Those of you standing, you just did a sit to stand transfer, right? All right, we can go ahead and sit back down. But transfers are the main way that we maintain our mobility. Many of us take it for granted, but with ALS, we begin to treasure our mobility, and we want to use all the strengths that you have to keep that independence and keep your transfers safe. Right? So we wanted to go through just a couple of the key ways to transfer, the ways you can keep your strength safely, and the ways that you can use technology to help you. Okay? So Amy's going to help me here a couple different ways, but if she's seated in a standard chair, we've got a couple things going on. Let me ask you if we could review just what are the 3 things about body positioning that Sarah reminded us of earlier. What about our feet?
Spread apart.
Spread apart. What about the
front to back?
Front to back, so that we're solid, right? What else?
Tuck.
Tuck. Low center of gravity, right? If we're standing up high, we're off balance. Okay? So wide position and center of gravity. Typically, in our transfer needs, we're going to experience first balance challenges. We see this with our younger children. We see this with our seniors. Balance is the key, right? If we stand tall, if we lean forward, we get off balance, right? So we want to stay centered over our body. And typically, we're looking at how can I use a railing, a bed, a nightstand, something to give me some more balance. Right? How many of you have done this in a dark night? Have you used your hand to support yourself or to stand? So as we stand, the interesting thing is, how many of you have pushed from a chair, pushed from behind to stand before? Have you done that before? As you look at your body, mechanics, when we push the chair, what happens to the chair? It moves a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, unless it's bolted to the floor, and most of us don't live in prison, so we get to move our chairs. So the one thing we want to do, of course, is just a housekeeping issue, but always make sure the chair won't move. Okay, so just for safety, you guys know about your brakes on your scooters, your brakes on your wheelchairs, but just a reminder, have some help there. And I'll talk about a technique when we talk about positioning that's important. But the other thing you can do is, have you ever noticed how much easier it is if you can reach forward when you're seated and stand? Rather than pushing from behind, our center of gravity, the key is how quickly can we get our butt over our knees? That's our question. So if I'm leaning forward, you tell me, how much easier is it to do that? These are a couple items. This is a floor-to-ceiling pole on the left. It's a temporary item. It's not bolted into the house or anything, so it can be moved, but it is locked in place by pressure. So it's an item around the bedside, an item around the living room or dining room or the bathroom that can help us get some balance. Okay? So our first stage of transfers is just standing and sitting. Our second stage of transfers is typically where we stand and sit and we operate around a pole or a bar or somebody else. Okay? If I stand beside Amy and she stands up and she's moving to a chair, we're trying to minimize the number of steps and we're trying to minimize our footwork, right? We're not trying to be dance stars on America's favorite, what's it called? Help me out there.
Dancing with the Stars.
Thank you. Dancing with America? Yeah, anyway. So the goal is we want to keep our feet together, we want to keep them spread, and we don't want to cross, right? What's the other thing we want to watch out for? It has something to do with our toes. We want to watch out for obstructions or rugs or things that can catch our toes, right? As we look at standing assisted, the second way of transferring, once we've gone from a stand and sit, is a stand and pivot. Typically, a stand and pivot is going to be done at a 90-degree angle, and so that we can minimize our footwork in our dance steps, right? The idea is we can stand and turn, typically 1 or 2 steps into a pivot and sit, okay? Again, the key thing we're talking about is balance. Okay, the next step as we look at the progression is, okay, now we're talking about leg strength. Some of us have more leg strength, some of us have more upper body strength, right? It kind of works differently that way. So we want to use our strength where we have it. If our upper body is strong, let's get a good solid place to hold. If our lower body is what's strong, then let's have someone else help us balance our upper body while we use our legs to make these transfers, okay? Step 4 is typically, and it's not done very often, but it's typically a bit of a skill. It's called a slide transfer. You guys saw the shower benches that were up here, right? The idea is instead of stepping over the tub, we sit down and slide. Same thing with the transfer board. Again, typically a 90-degree transfer. We're going to slide part of the board in under the hip. One thing to remember as we look at equipment, you notice that we saw a few of these were removable and a few of them weren't. The armrests are typically what get in the way of a slide transfer. So if you're planning to slide transfer into your recliner, you might want to rethink that because it's difficult. The idea of a slide transfer is there's never a point in our transfer that we have a fall, potential fall. And that's an important piece. So this skill is something to be practiced early rather than later. A couple pictures here. As we look at that slide transfer on the top, you can see that 90-degree chair to bed. You can see that there's one important thing, and it's about the height of the transfer. What do we want to do with our chair or our bed? We want to match our height, right? How easy do you think it is to go uphill on a slide transfer? How easy do you think it is to go downhill? A lot easier, as long as it's not crazy, right? So downhills are good, but we got to be careful because we're going to have to go the other way, right? So our bed height, our chair heights, all these things start to be something we think about. That's not calculus, but practicing this skill will make sure your number of falls are very small, okay? And you'll notice that you're able to use your upper body strength and your lower body strength as you slide from chair to chair, okay? The other thing you want to make sure to look at is positioning. How many of you have sat in a chair and slouched? Amy will give us a good example of it. How many of you get about to the first half of the cushion, and that's as far back as we can get? It happens in the bed too. How many times do we not get into the middle of the bed where we like to sleep, but we get on the edges, and now how do we get there, right? So as we look at these other ways of transfer, there are also good ways for positioning. Positioning is, right now you're seated at the back of the chair. You notice how your hips are fully into the back of the seat. And that's a good posture, good position. There you go. Better on your back, exactly. When we slouch, what we do is we put a lot of pressure on our hips. That's the other thing we run into. So you'll notice the power equipment we just saw. Did you notice how it tilted? A lot of times that equipment will help you position into a good seated position. The only other option as we look at care is we have to do it manually. We have to jerk or pull or lift. How many of you were born with a handle on your body? Nobody? Because if you were born in Russia, they you know, here in America, we're not born with handles on our body. So the challenge is, where do we grip people, right?
I disagree. We have love handles.
You have love handles? There you go. They're just like handles, except you can't grab them. You can only enjoy them. All right, so beyond the last step of transfers is the unassisted transfer. Our fourth transfer is called the bear hug. How many of you know what that one looks like? It's just basically you have at least half of the person's weight Again, our feet are wide. We're splitting the difference, and we're lifting and sliding. Typically, you'll have a gait belt in this type of a transfer, but if you already like your partner, you might as well give them a bear hug, right? Be careful with this because it does put a lot of strain on the caregiver. And of course, as we already heard, you can't prevent a fall, you can only try to protect against a fall. So do be careful. As we go into the last section here, just want to show you a couple options as we look at our protecting our independence and the ability to make transfers. Here are a couple options as we look at some of the technology that's available. The goal again is to make our transfers easy, and there's 4 basic transfers in our day. There's a chair to chair. That's what happened when we stood up and sat down. That's what happens, by the way, when you stand up and walk across the room to a chair. It's the same chair to chair. There's chair to toilet, there's chair to tub or shower, and there's chair to bed. Okay, so those are our typical transfers. How many of you think in your routine, how many transfers a day do you think you make?
Oh,
I'm curious, Pat, how many do you think you make in a day?
No idea. A lot.
20?
Oh, minimum.
Minimum, yep. And as we look at ALS, the real key is it gives us the ability to transfer. It just doesn't let us transfer unlimited amount of times. So we want to plan those and make those simple for times that we maybe have a little bit of a tougher day. The ceiling lift is basically a track that goes wherever we want to transfer, and it picks us up and allows us to move to any position we like. We're going to hear a little bit more about what's called a patient lift, and it's designed to roll on the floor and provide the same type of a transfer. The main difference is we have to have a caregiver with a patient lift, and with some of the other lifts out there, we can do this independently. Okay, so, or with the caregiver. So there's really a couple options. But as you noticed, as we look here, we can transfer along the track from bed to chair to toilet to tub. And this lift actually includes a motor in the lift that drives along the rail. So again, as we look at caregivers, this is the least reliance on a caregiver, the most on the person pushing the button. And typically it comes in a number of different controls. If you see the floor lifts, we have to maneuver our wives or husbands or daughters under a bed or over a bed, and so we're doing all the work as a caregiver with that type of lift. There is a wall lift at the top, and it's designed to work, again, not on the floor, but attached to a wall, and it works in a semicircle, so that we're able to move from bed to chair, or in a bathroom we can move from toilet to chair to tub or shower. Last but not least, how can we eliminate transfers? We think about how many times we move from our bed into the bathroom, from our bathroom, 3 or 4 different transfers in that bathroom, and then back. As we get clothes on, as we get cleaner, what about these things? Think of these multiple transfers that we do. A lot of our clients will move from bed to a wheelchair, into the bathroom, to a toilet or a shower chair or a commode chair, and there's these multiple transfers. So sometimes we can go directly from room to room, eliminate a transfer, go directly into the bathroom and take care of those daily needs. We can go directly into the bathtub or go back to the bed, for instance, for changing clothes or for drying or this type of thing as we come out of the bathroom. So any questions as we look through here? Happy to entertain a couple of questions as you look at your transfers and how to enjoy them a little bit. Pretty good? I like it. Last but not least, obviously as we remodel homes or provide a lift, we want to look at what's better, okay? Typically our floor lifts don't work well in the bathroom, but before you remodel your shower, you might consider a lift because you can fly over the obstacles with a lift versus removing and remodeling those obstacles. And especially if you think you might move, if you think that you may have changing needs like ALS constantly gives us, you know, you're going to find that sometimes it's best not to be stuck in one solution, but rather the ceiling lift can be upgradable, so you can add on another section of track to go into the bedroom, or add on a bathtub, for instance. Maybe you're really tied to your bathtub and want to use that. So thanks for you guys as you do your transfers. Be safe, be strong, and hopefully what we'll see is continued independence as you work in your transfers.
Great, thank you. And we are going to have Joe and Jennifer come on up. Joe and Jennifer are with Hill-Rom, two separate kind of entities. So they're going to be covering a lot of information, and so I'm just going to bring them up right away. So I will hand you the clicker. Oh, you guys don't have a clicker piece, do you? Okay. I'm going to keep the clicker then.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm not good with this either. So I'm Jennifer Lenz. I'm with Hill-Rom on the respiratory care side. And we're going to switch gears a bit and talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, mucus and sputum. So I am on the respiratory care side. I represent a couple of different products to help our patients mobilize secretion out of their lungs. But first, before we get into that, I just wanted to touch a bit about why airway clearance is important, why it's important to keep up with the integrity of your lungs. So, and this is going to be true regardless of if you have ALS or COPD, cystic fibrosis with our kids. Mucus is good. Too much mucus, not so good. So we need to keep the body on a nice even balance with the excess mucus in the lungs. There's a cycle, an airway clearance cycle, that we don't really know where it starts, but when you get an injury in the lungs, it produces sputum. We need to remove that. That sputum will cause infections. That infection will cause more sputum production. It continues on and on and on. So we need to get rid of it. With ALS, as the disease progresses, the musculature in the body, in the airways, and the diaphragm tends to deteriorate, which makes it more and more difficult for that sputum to be released. There's things that we can do non-mechanically that can help mobilize that secretion. Drinking more water, staying more active. There are some medications, mucolytic type things that can help as well as some of these alternative devices too. So I want to talk a little bit about the vest, which is the product I brought today. Has anybody seen the vest, used the vest? No? I know there's been, yes, Mr. Taylor has. And I do encourage you after our quick presentation to stop by the booth. I did bring the machine and we can try it on if you like and play with it. Has anybody had a caregiver do clapping and positioning to help mobilize secretions from the lungs before? Y'all are too healthy. But anyway, sometimes that does happen, and the vest is just an alternative to that clapping and positioning. So when the vest inflates with air, it starts to vibrate against that chest. Those vibrations are acting like little mini coughs in the lungs, and those little mini coughs help not only to shear the secretions off of the cilia, which are just the hairs inside your airways, and then once those secretions are loosened from the cilia, the air is going to mix with those loosened secretions to thin them out. So now we have loosened, thinner secretions mobilizing up to the back of the throat to be coughed out or suctioned. So when we like to cough, like this, it's nice and deep, and you can feel it from the bottom, from your diaphragm. As that ability starts to get less and less, but I'm just not coughing in the microphone. It's more and more difficult to get secretions from these smaller airways up and out. So a device like the vest, creating airflow through the entire airway, will get the secretions even from the smaller portions, the smaller. So any questions on that? I know I need to leave some time for my partner to talk a bit. Surfacely, any questions? Well, I would encourage you to stop by the table. We have some information. I also have a pretty good tool. It's called an ALS screening tool for airway clearance. And there's 4 questions. And the tool says if you can answer yes to any 2 of those questions, you may be a good candidate for some sort of airway clearance. And that may be a vest or another type of device that's out there. If you answer all 4 questions yes, you're a very strong candidate. I know ALS is an unpredictable disease, and sometimes respiratory problems come into play and sometimes they don't. So the vest or other airway clearance modalities may not be appropriate today, but it's something to keep tucked in the back of your head just in case when and if that changes. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe Mattingly now, and he's going to talk a little bit about beds and the lifts. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Mattingly. I represent the home care division of Hillrom, Jennifer's colleague. I'm going to talk a little bit less about my products as my products and more as a consultative conversation for when you are considering buying a specialty bed or a specialty mattress or a mobile lift. There are a lot of pitfalls to making a decision. If you're basing your decision financially, or if you don't do the research ahead of time, what I have experienced with a lot of patients is regret and frustration. So hopefully what I talk about will help you mitigate regret and frustration. So I'm going up right now, and it doesn't seem like much, but just for knowledge base, everything that I'm displaying today is Medicare and Colorado Medicaid approved. And there's differences in what you can access. Again, do the research. It doesn't matter what vendor you buy from, just make sure you're getting what you need and deserve. So with the right research and utilizing resources out there, you can get what you need. I am going up right now with the push of a button, which means this bed is fully electric. Many beds out there are crank beds. So, what I'd like to illustrate is everything here is as important to the patient because they can raise the bed to a working height to provide a treatment or a therapy. Or whatever the case. And if they get the bed up to a good height, which should be no less than 25 inches, then the caregiver can stand over the patient in a ergonomically correct way and do what they need to do. Also, a benefit to the patient with a fully electric bed is the caregiver can stand at the bedside with the patient instead of at the back while they're cranking. So it's important to access a fully electric bed regardless of what you do. Something else that's really nice about a fully electric bed is you could use it as an egress tool. So Nathan talked a little bit about the bear hug transfer. In this position right here, utilizing the bed, the caregiver can be pushing the button as the patient is raising up. Now the bed is doing most of the work right now. I'm just sitting here, my caregiver's in front of me hypothetically. Once I get to the fully extended length, the caregiver now, this is as high as the bed can go, the caregiver now can easily access me out of bed and position me into my chair. That's another benefit. I'm not very good at talking in microphones, so I'm sorry if there's lots of variances. The other thing is something you really want to pay attention to is you want to make sure that the bed can go down, not just the bed frame, but the surface on top of the bed needs to be able to go down lower than 18 inches. Because again, as Nathan was saying, when you're doing a transfer, it's very important to be able to do a graceful transfer and mitigate shear and friction. I passed out a little square blue pamphlet on the tables. It's probably the best education tool I've ever seen on pressure ulcers. It doesn't talk about anything in particular other than the four usual suspects, and that is pressure, shear, friction, and moisture. And people who are immobile typically suffer from all of those at some point. If it's due to transfer, the pressure of just laying in one position too long, the shear and the friction can come from poor transfer. Moisture comes from night sweats, or you just might be unusually hot. Your skin gets moist, and or if you're incontinent, exposed moisture to the skin is one of the worst enemies, that the skin loses all its elasticity. You're really, at that point, very vulnerable to pressure ulcers. So anyhow, that everything that we're going to be talking about will be based around trying to not have that happen and to combat those four things. Something else you should look for in a home care bed frame is what they call shearless pivot. And that is where, when you go head up, at the same time, the foot section should gatch. What that does is that helps the patient not go into the footboard, which is very, very common with hospital beds. In this situation, you'll notice that the patient is being cradled, and they're not going to bottom out. They're going to be very comfortable, and they're not going to slide down. Again, that's important to both the patient and the caregiver, because what happens if a frame doesn't have shearless pivot, and the patient does go down? Now the caregiver has to move the patient up back to head of bed and get their coccyx section over the center of the bed so they're sitting the bed right. That adds a lot of risk to the caregiver's back, and it's probably one of the chief reasons for injury in the hospital. And it also, again, is shear and friction on the patient. So with having that feature in the bed, very, very important feature. And right now I'm just speaking specifically about bed frame functions. The bed should also have lockout on all the wheel casters. You don't want the bed rolling around as you're moving patients back and forth. You want to be able to have a very stable platform. Also, any bed that you get should be able to be retrofitted with caster extenders. Because you may have bought the bed first, or you may have bought the lift second, or there might be other apparatus device. But another mistake I see all the time are people have products that weren't thought through on the heels of each other, and they have a brand new lift that they bought that they now can't use to do bed, to get up under the bed because the frame of the lift won't fit under the bed. So all those things really need to be looked at when you're considering a purchase of either a bed or a lift. You got to kind of think of what the next step might be. Those are really the key features. I could go on and on and on, but those are the major mistakes that I see, and the biggest regrets I see with both patients and caregivers by not paying attention to those features of the bed frame itself. I'm going to move over to the mattress now. This is a specialty mattress. Again, many, many considerations to be taken into consideration when you're looking at a specialty wound care mattress. This one here takes a lot of things into consideration as a specialty support surface. Mainly, the first thing it does is it's pressure mapped, and it does reduce pressure. So the interface pressure of your skin laying against this mattress is going to be reduced significantly. This mattress can treat, prevent, and heal pressure ulcers. So you want to understand the total therapy of what any mattress provides. Another big mistake I'm seeing out there is probably my biggest enemy in my business right now is I have people going out and spending thousands of dollars on Tempur-Pedic mattresses that are wonderfully comfortable. In fact, when I go to Grand Junction on business, there's a hotel I stay there because that's all they have is Tempur-Pedics in their hotel. They're great. I sleep like a dead rock. If I was to have a pressure ulcer, or if I was to try to avoid getting a pressure ulcer, that doesn't mean because it's comfortable it's going to avoid that. Some of them are even being positioned as therapy mattresses, and they might be therapeutic from the perspective that you're getting very good rest, but they're not helping with wound care at all. And those devices, commercial devices, are manufactured with a 6 to 8 hour sleep pattern on them, a typical average human sleep pattern, where specialty surfaces are designed and developed for up to